Faith the inheritance lie fay the morning sun cut through the corrugated steel like a blade through memory, casting long shadows across the concrete floor of riverside storage auctions. Dust particles danced in the golden streams, each speck a fragment of someone's abandoned life waiting to be claimed. The air tasted of rust and regret. Marcus Holloway stood at the back of the small crowd, his calloused hands buried deep in his work jacket pockets. 23 years of construction had carved lines into his face that spoke of honest labor and honest poverty. His dark eyes stayed fixed on Unit 247, the one with the faded yellow door and the rusted padlock that had kept their father's secrets locked away for 6 months. Unit 247 called out Jerry Kowalski, the auctioneer whose gravelly voice had been the soundtrack to 1,000 family tragedies. Rented by Thomas Holloway, deceased. Rent's been in default since June. We start the bidding at $25. Marcus felt his jaw tighten. Thomas Holloway had died with $17 in his checking account and a stack of unpaid medical bills that could choke a horse. Whatever was in that unit couldn't be worth more than the metal it was stored in. Old man probably just stuffed it full of newspapers and broken dreams like everything else he touched. 25, Marcus called out, his voice cutting through the murmur of the dozen other bidders. 30. The voice came from his left, smooth and confident. Marcus didn't need to turn his head to know who it belonged to. Daniel Holloway stood 20 feet away, his tailored suit immaculate, despite the warehouse dust, his silver watch catching the morning light like a beacon of prosperity. Everything about him screamed success, from his perfectly styled hair to his Italian leather shoes that probably cost more than Marcus made in a month. Their eyes met across the concrete expanse. 6 years of silence stretched between them like a chasm. 6 years since their father's 70th birthday, when Daniel had called the old man a failure, and Marcus had put his fist through the restaurant wall. 6 years since either brother had spoken a word to the other. 40, Marcus countered, his voice steady despite the rage building in his chest. Daniel's lips curved into that familiar smirk, the one that had gotten him out of trouble in high school and into corner offices as an adult. 60. The other bidders began to back away, sensing the electricity in the air. This wasn't about storage unit economics anymore. This was about blood and pride, and 29 years of being the brother who stayed home while the other one conquered the world. 75, Marcus said, the words coming out harder than he intended. 100. Jerry Kowalski's eyes lit up. He'd seen family feuds play out over storage units before, but rarely with this kind of venom. We have 100. Do I hear 125? Marcus felt the weight of his savings account in his chest. $437. That was all he had left after paying for their father's funeral that Daniel hadn't bothered to attend. The old bastard had died alone in a county hospital, clutching Marcus's hand and whispering apologies for mistakes neither of them could name. 125, he said. Daniel straightened his tie, a gesture Marcus recognized from their childhood. It is what Danny did when he was about to deliver the killing blow. 200. The words hit Marcus like a physical force. $200 was groceries for a month, gas money to get to job sites, the buffer between making rent and sleeping in his truck. But something deeper than logic was driving him now, something that tasted like childhood resentment and felt like his father's disappointed ghost. 250. 300. 350. The numbers climbed like a fever dream, each bid driving them further from reason and deeper into the minefield of their shared history. Marcus could feel the eyes of the other bidders on him, could sense their mixture of excitement and discomfort as they witnessed two brothers tearing each other apart over their dead father's garbage. 400, Marcus said, his voice barely above a whisper. Daniel paused for the first time, his confidence flickering like a candle in the wind. 400 was real money, even for him. He studied his brother's face, looking for weakness, for the moment when Marcus would break the way he always had when they were kids. "$4.50, Daniel said finally. Marcus felt something crack inside his chest. He was out, done, finished. The mathematics of poverty had spoken, and they said what they always said: the rich brother wins, the poor brother loses, and their father's memory goes to the highest bidder. "Sold to the gentleman in the suit," Jerry announced after waiting for a counterbid that would never come. $450. The crowd began to disperse, moving on to the next unit and the next family's tragedy. Marcus stood frozen, watching as Daniel walked toward the yellow door with the same easy confidence he'd carried since high school. The same confidence that had gotten him a full scholarship to Stanford while Marcus scraped together community college tuition. The same confidence that had built him a software company while Marcus swung a hammer for $35,000 a year. Daniel fumbled with the bolt cutters Jerry handed him, his soft hands unpracticed with tools. Marcus almost smiled at that, almost. The lock fell to the concrete with a metallic clang that echoed through the warehouse like a gunshot. Daniel grabbed the handle and pulled. The door rolled up with a screech of protest, revealing nothing. Not nothing in the sense of empty space, but nothing in the sense of exactly what Marcus had expected. Cardboard boxes stacked floor to ceiling, their edges soft with age and moisture. A few pieces of furniture covered in yellowed sheets. The detritus of a life lived in disappointment and quiet desperation. "Jesus Christ," Daniel muttered. Stepping into the unit. What did the old man think this was worth? Marcus found himself moving forward despite his anger, drawn by the gravity of family obligation and morbid curiosity. The unit smelled like their father's house had smelled. Old Spice cologne mixed with Marlboro Reds and the particular sadness of a man who'd outlived his dreams. Daniel was already pulling back sheets, revealing furniture that belonged in a garage sale rather than a storage unit. A kitchen table with one leg shorter than the others. A recliner with the stuffing showing through the arms. A bookshelf that Thomas had built himself, crooked and proud. "This is it?" Daniel said, his voice rising with indignation. "This is what I just paid $450 for, this garbage." Marcus wanted to point out that it was their father's garbage, that maybe it deserved more respect than Daniel's golden boy tantrum, but something else caught his attention. In the back corner of the unit, hidden behind the bookshelf, was something that didn't belong. A wooden crate, professional and new-looking, completely at odds with the accumulated junk of their father's life. It was maybe 3 feet square, with metal clasps and corner reinforcements that spoke of expensive contents and careful transport. "Danny," he said, the childhood nickname slipping out before he could stop it. Daniel followed his gaze and froze. They stared at the crate in silence for a long moment, both thinking the same thing but neither wanting to be the first to say it. Their father had died poor, county hospital poor, medical debt poor. Whatever was in that crate couldn't be his. "Maybe he was storing it for someone," Daniel said finally, but his voice lacked conviction. Marcus stepped into the unit without invitation, his work boots crunching on the concrete up close. The crate looked even more expensive. Professional shipping materials, climate control seals. Whatever was inside had been packed by someone who knew what they were doing. "Help me move this shelf," he said. For a moment, Daniel looked like he might refuse. Then curiosity won over pride, and he put his soft hands on the makeshift furniture their father had been so proud of. Together, they shifted it enough to reach the crate. The clasp opened with well-oiled clicks. Marcus lifted the lid and felt his world tilt off its axis. Paintings, real paintings, not prints or reproductions. The kind of art Marcus had only seen in museums during elementary school field trips. The colors seemed to glow even in the dim warehouse light, rich and deep and impossibly valuable. There had to be 6 of them, maybe 7. each wrapped in protective cloth and nestled in custom foam like sleeping treasures. "Holy shit," Daniel breathed. Marcus lifted one carefully, his calloused hands suddenly gentle. It was a landscape, all sweeping hills and dramatic skies rendered in oil so thick he could see the brushstrokes. Even to his untrained eye, it screamed worth. Serious worth. Life-changing worth. "Look at this," Daniel said, pulling out a smaller piece. "This signature. I think this is a real Winslow Homer." The name meant nothing to Marcus. But Daniel's tone said everything. His brother might be an asshole, but he wasn't stupid. If Daniel thought it was worth something, it was probably worth more than something. "How much?" Marcus asked. "I don't know. Hundreds of thousands, maybe millions." Daniel's voice was climbing toward hysteria. "Marcus, if these are real, if these are actually authentic..." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. They both understood what they were looking at. Their father, who had died counting change for his morning coffee, had somehow been sitting on a fortune. Their father, who had borrowed $20 from Marcus for groceries the week before he died, had been hiding artwork worth more than most people made in a lifetime. "There has to be an explanation," Marcus said. But even as he said it, he was thinking about the funeral, about the medical bills, about watching their father deny himself medication because he couldn't afford both pills and food. If Thomas Holloway had owned this art, why had he died poor? Daniel was already pulling out his phone, taking pictures of signatures and detail shots of each piece. Always working an angle, always looking for the profit margin. "We need to get these appraised," he said. "We need to find out exactly what we're dealing with here." "We," Marcus said, the word coming out sharper than intended. Daniel looked up from his phone, his face hardening. "I bought this unit, Marcus. Legally, this is mine. With money you made while Dad was dying alone. Don't you dare, while he was calling me every night, asking when his other son might visit." Daniel's jaw tightened. "I was building something. I was trying to make a success of myself instead of staying here and wallowing in this graveyard of mediocrity." "You were running away, like you always ran away. And you were enabling him like you always enabled him, keeping him comfortable in his failure instead of pushing him to be better." The words hung in the air like smoke, acrid and poisonous. 29 years of resentment distilled into 2 sentences that cut deeper than either man had intended. Marcus turned back to the paintings, partly to avoid his brother's eyes, and partly because looking at them was easier than looking at the wreckage of their relationship. That is when he saw it. In the corner of the largest painting, partially hidden by the frame, was a small brass plaque. The kind museums use to identify pieces in their collections. He leaned closer, squinting in the dim light. Property of the Metropolitan Museum of Art, on loan to private collection. 1987 to 1992. The words didn't make sense at first. Then they made too much sense, and Marcus felt something cold settle in his stomach, like a stone. "Daniel," he said quietly, "look at this." His brother leaned over, following Marcus's pointing finger. When he saw the plaque, his face went white. That can't be right," Daniel said. But Marcus was already checking the others, his hands moving with increasing urgency. Museum plaques, gallery tags, insurance appraisals with names that weren't Thomas Holloway. Piece by piece, the truth assembled itself like a jigsaw puzzle made of broken glass. Their father hadn't owned these paintings, he'd stolen them. "This doesn't make sense," Daniel said. But his voice was weak, unconvincing even to himself. Dad wasn't a criminal, he was just Dad. Marcus stared at a receipt tucked between 2 of the canvases. Private insurance appraisal, client T. Holloway, value $2.3 million. Date the 15th of March, 1993. 1993. Marcus was 14 that year. Daniel was 16. That was the year their father had suddenly quit his job at the factory. The year he'd claimed he was starting his own business. The year everything had started to fall apart. He told us he was going to be a consultant, Marcus said, the memory surfacing like a body in dark water. Remember, he bought those suits, rented that office space downtown. It lasted 6 months, Daniel said. Then he went back to the factory, said the economy was bad, that his clients couldn't pay. But now they knew better. Now they understood what their father had really been doing during those 6 months in 1993. He'd been planning the theft of his life, and somehow, impossibly, he'd pulled it off. The insurance money, Marcus said. That is what he was living on. That is how he afforded the house, the car, why he could pay for your college. Daniel shook his head. No, that is not. He had legitimate income. He worked his whole life. Making $30,000 a year at the factory, you think that paid for Stanford tuition? The silence stretched between them like a grave. Marcus could see his brother doing the math, adding up the numbers that had never quite made sense. Their father's income versus their lifestyle. The mysterious investments Thomas had claimed were supporting them. The way he'd always been vague about money, changing the subject whenever either son asked direct questions. So what? Daniel said finally, his voice desperate. So what if he did steal them? That was 30 years ago, the statute of limitations. Doesn't apply to stolen art, Marcus finished. I watch the news, Danny. Art theft never expires. These belong to museums, to galleries, to people who've been looking for them for 3 decades. Daniel sank down onto one of the covered chairs, his perfect composure finally cracking. This can't be happening. This can't be real. But Marcus was already thinking ahead, already seeing the implications spreading out like ripples in a pond. If their father had stolen these paintings, then everything they'd built their lives on was a lie. Daniel's education funded by crime, the house they'd grown up in bought with blood money, their father's reputation as a hard-working man who'd fallen on tough times, all of it fiction. We have to give them back, Marcus said. Are you insane? Daniel's head snapped up, his eyes wild. Do you have any idea what this means? We're accessories after the fact. We're handling stolen goods. If we turn these in, we're admitting our father was a criminal. He was a criminal. We don't know that for sure. Marcus gestured at the evidence surrounding them. What more do you need, a confession? Daniel stood up, pacing in the small space like a caged animal. There has to be another explanation. Maybe he was holding them for someone. Maybe he found them. Maybe you need to stop being a lawyer for 5 minutes and start being a human being. The words hit Daniel like a slap. He stopped pacing, turned to face his brother with something dangerous in his eyes. Don't lecture me about being human, Marcus. You are standing there talking about giving away millions of dollars like it is nothing. You know what that money could do, what it could buy? Yeah, I know exactly what it bought our father. 30 years of guilt and a lonely death. You don't know he felt guilty. He died holding my hand and apologizing for everything. Everything, Danny. He couldn't even name what he was sorry for, but he kept saying it over and over. I am sorry, son. I am so sorry for what I did. Daniel's face went pale again. He never said anything like that to me, because you weren't there. The truth hung between them like a blade. Daniel had made his choice years ago, success over family, ambition over obligation. He'd built his fortune and his reputation while their father had slowly crumbled under the weight of secrets neither son had known he was carrying. So what do you want to do? Daniel asked finally. Call the FBI, destroy our lives, because the old man made some questionable choices 30 years ago? Marcus looked at his brother, really looked at him. Still handsome at 30. 5, still carrying himself like the golden boy who could charm his way out of any situation. But there were lines around his eyes now, stress marks that spoke of a life lived in pursuit of things that never quite satisfied, success without fulfillment, money without meaning. "I want to do the right thing," Marcus said simply. "The right thing for who? For the museums that probably got insurance payouts decades ago? For the people who'll destroy our father's memory? Or for us, the sons who deserve to inherit something more than debt and disappointment?" It was a good argument. A lawyer's argument. And Marcus could feel its pull, the seductive logic of self-preservation and justification. No one had been hurt by keeping the secret for 30 more years. The museums had survived, the galleries had moved on. Why should 2 middle-aged brothers suffer for their father's sins? But then he thought about Thomas Holloway's last words, about the weight of secrets and the way guilt could eat a man from the inside out, about the kind of life built on stolen foundations. "Because if we keep them, we become him," Marcus said. "We become the kind of men who can live with lies." Daniel stared at him for a long moment, something shifting behind his eyes. For a second, Marcus thought he might be getting through. Then his brother's expression hardened again, and Marcus knew he'd lost him. "I am not giving up millions of dollars because you want to feel good about yourself," Daniel said. "These paintings are mine now. I bought this unit legally." "You bought Dad's storage unit? You didn't buy stolen art? Prove it was stolen?" "The museum tags aren't proof enough? They prove the paintings were once on loan from museums. They don't prove theft. Maybe Dad was a legitimate collector. Maybe he bought them through proper channels and just never updated the paperwork." It was bullshit, and they both knew it. But it was the kind of bullshit that could stand up in court, the kind of legal technicality that rich men hired lawyers to find. Marcus felt something die inside him, some last hope that his brother might choose conscience over cash. "This is who you really are, isn't it?" Marcus said. "This is what success turned you into. Someone who can look at stolen art and see a business opportunity?" "And this is who you really are," Daniel shot back. "Someone so comfortable with failure that he'd rather be poor and righteous than rich and practical. Dad left us something valuable for once in his miserable life, and you want to throw it away because it doesn't fit your idea of moral purity." The words stung because they contained just enough truth to cut deep. Marcus had chosen the harder path, the blue-collar life of honest labor and modest rewards. He'd stayed home, taken care of their father, built a life measured in small satisfactions rather than big victories. And yes, part of him did want to throw away the paintings. Part of him would rather be poor than dirty, but there was something else driving him. Something deeper than righteousness or moral vanity. He thought about their father's funeral, about standing alone at the graveside while snow fell on the cheap casket, about the medical bills that would take him years to pay off, about the way Thomas Holloway had died, broke and alone and whispering apologies for sins his sons had never known he'd committed. "He was trying to tell me," Marcus said quietly. At the end, when he kept apologizing, he was trying to tell me about this. Daniel's expression softened slightly. "Marcus, he carried this secret for 30 years, Danny. It killed him. Not the cancer, not the medical bills, the guilt. It ate him alive from the inside out. And now you want us to carry it too. We don't have to feel guilty about something we didn't do. But we do have to live with it. We have to look ourselves in the mirror every morning knowing what we know. We have to build our lives on money that was never ours to begin with." Daniel was quiet for a long moment, his eyes moving from painting to painting like he was calculating their worth down to the last dollar. When he finally spoke, his voice was different, harder, more resolved. "I am keeping them," he said. "I am going to have them appraised, find a private buyer, and sell them quietly. The museums will never know they existed. And our father's memory. Our father's memory is safe. No one ever has to know what he did. Marcus felt something break inside him. Some last connection to the brother he'd grown up with. I'll know. You'll get over it, will you? Daniel gathered up his photographs, slipping his phone back into his jacket pocket. I am going to call a moving company, have everything transported to a secure location. If you try to interfere with that, I'll have you arrested for theft. The threat hung between them like poison. Marcus realized with sudden clarity that this wasn't just about the paintings anymore. This was about everything that had gone wrong between them, every choice that had led them to this moment. Daniel saw the art as vindication, proof that their father had been more than just another working-class failure. Marcus saw it as damnation, evidence that success built on lies was no success at all. What about the right thing? Marcus asked. The right thing is taking care of family. The right thing is not throwing away a fortune because of some misguided sense of guilt over something we had nothing to do with. And what about the people these were stolen from? What about them? They've lived without these paintings for 30 years. They can live without them for 30 more. Marcus looked around the storage unit one more time, taking in the careful arrangement of their father's mediocre possessions and the fortune hidden behind them. Two different lives existing in the same small space. The public life of Thomas Holloway the working man and the secret life of Thomas Holloway the art thief. I can't stop you, he said finally. No, you can't. But I can't be part of it either. Daniel paused in his gathering of evidence. What does that mean? It means I am walking away. From this, from the paintings, from you. I don't want any part of what you are planning to do. Marcus, be reasonable. Your share would be enough to change your life. No more construction work, no more worrying about money. You could go back to school, travel, do whatever you want. The offer was tempting, more tempting. Financial freedom was a dream he'd given up years ago, resigned himself to a life of paycheck, to paycheck survival and modest hopes. But the price Daniel was asking felt too high. I'd rather be poor and clean than rich and dirty, Marcus said. That is noble. That is also stupid. Maybe, but it is who I am. They stared at each other across the small space, two brothers who had started the morning as strangers and would end it as enemies. The paintings sat between them like evidence in a trial that would never come, beautiful and valuable and absolutely corrupting. So that is it? Daniel asked. You are just going to walk away? That is it, and if I make millions off these paintings, you don't want any part of it. I don't want any part of what you are becoming. Daniel's face hardened again. Fine, your choice. But don't come crying to me in 10 years when you are still swinging a hammer for minimum wage and wondering what your life might have been like if you'd had some balls. Marcus turned toward the entrance of the storage unit, then paused. Dad was right to apologize, he said without looking back. Some things are worth more than money. He walked out into the harsh warehouse light, leaving his brother alone with their father's secrets. Behind him, he could hear Daniel making phone calls, arranging for the careful transport of stolen dreams. The voices echoed off the concrete walls like whispers of ghosts, who would never rest. Outside, the sun was higher now, burning off the morning coolness and promising another hot day. Marcus climbed into his truck and sat for a moment, hands on the steering wheel, thinking about choices and consequences and the weight of family loyalty. His phone buzzed. A text from Daniel, last chance. 50/50th split. No questions asked. Marcus deleted the message without responding. Some bridges were worth burning. He started the truck and drove away from Riverside Storage, leaving behind millions of dollars and the last connection to his brother. In his rearview mirror, he could see Daniel's BMW still parked outside the warehouse, waiting for the moving trucks that would carry away their father's final secret. 3 months later, Marcus would read about the miraculous recovery of 7 stolen masterpieces, returned anonymously to their rightful owners by an unknown Good Samaritan. The story would mention that the paintings had been missing for over 30 years, that their recovery was valued at approximately $3.2 million, and that the FBI was investigating but had no leads. The story wouldn't mention Thomas Holloway or his sons or the storage unit, where secrets went to die. It wouldn't mention the family that had been destroyed by greed, or the brother who had chosen conscience over cash. But Marcus would know. And somewhere, in an expensive condo paid for with legitimate money earned the hard way, Daniel would know too. And maybe, just maybe, their father's ghost could finally rest. But that would be another story for another day, in another warehouse where forgotten lives waited to be discovered by strangers who couldn't possibly understand what they'd found. The sun climbed higher, burning away the shadows, leaving only the truth that some inheritances are too expensive to claim.